among startups on how to raise capital. We read funding news every day. Each stage we have a funding news now. And each stage has its own challenges, and seed stage is no exception. To understand how to raise a seed capital round, we requested Adit and Vinod to share their views. On this note, I once again welcome both of you. For the participants, please feel free to ask your questions. There is a raise your hand button which you can use, and you can type in your question there as well. Thank you, Adit. Thank you, Vinod. Let me start with Adit. If you can share some background about Gamba Capital, how the inception of Gamba Capital was coined, and then we can move to Vinod to understand more about Java Capital.
Sure. Thank you, Varun. Gamba Capital was started in late 2017. It's more of a single family office in its current form. We started this to make investments in the angel rounds. Now, I know there are various terms you call angel rounds, seed rounds, pre-seed rounds, but essentially early stage deals. We've made around 18 investments since then across sectors. You all can always visit our portfolio to have a look at the companies in which we've invested. We are bottoms up thesis driven investors. We overall, though sector agnostic, we focus on SaaS companies and on the consumer tech companies. We also initially started off investing in some non-tech businesses, which later on our thesis has got refined. And yeah, we're actively investing. Obviously, because of COVID, there is some slowdown, but yeah, that's where we are. This year, probably we'll convert ourselves into more of a micro VC fund and have more LPs on the board.
Yeah. Okay, great. Vinod, what do you have to share on Java Capital? How did it start?
Yeah, I mean, Java Capital just is like a newborn baby. It started only in May. I mean, the thought has been there for some time. You know, I've discussed this with Adit also over the years when I was at K-Start and Kalari. This is Java Capital is at some form of expression of what I wanted to do in the long run, and a seed funding or venture capital funding, right? Just like startups, right, is a long game. So this is my long game. I kind of believe this is a long game, the longest game that I'm possibly going to play in my career. And I have two partners with me. We launched this in May, primarily focusing on angel, pre-seed, and seed stages, similar to what Adit, focuses on from a stage point of view. In Java will do check sizes of, $150K to over $250K dollars, sub 2 to 3 million valuations, sweet spot for us to get an entry at. We've got about 4 or 5 sectors like what Manan mentioned right in the introduction, deep tech, financial technologies, healthcare, consumer internet, and brands. These are like about 5 areas that we really want to focus on and try play within those areas. Obviously, we'll be open to others, but this is something that we want to focus on as a team. Prior to that, I think there's a lot of portfolio of what I've worked with in my own personal investments since 2014. That's put up on the website. People can take a look. Currently, we just started. We've all just about closed the first deal. Paperwork's on. We're working on a second deal. And we hope to average at a deal like every 45 days at the current pace. At least that's what it looks like.
Interesting. So how do you, Vinod, find that startup where you feel that you have to invest in this particular? What is how the whole process work? How does that work?
So one, I think, it lends itself from the experience of the past. There are two things I think, when you want to look at startups. One is pattern matching, that is one, but you should not just depend on pattern matching. When I say pattern matching, right, over the last 7 years, what I have built as an internal capacity or what my partners have built in, right, is like a pattern matching capacity to see, what might work, what might not work. But, we don't go about only that, you need to keep that in mind. Definitely, you need to match patterns. You need to recognize patterns. And obviously, the human mind is made to, recognize patterns over a period of time. That's one piece. Having said that, right, also you need to be fundamentally aware that, people are going to keep on breaking patterns. If new things are going to emerge, that is by breaking patterns. So consciously being aware of these two things, right, will give you a right balance to see, what kind of startups might work. And this is philosophical answer, okay, not a very specific answer that I'm trying to get at, right? This is at the background philosophical way to look at it. some pattern matching, open to unlearning, open to change in views. I just want to be very adaptable, and change my view, because something is fundamentally changed. I want to keep myself, open to change my view and, go back and, reevaluate a company if something's changed. Yeah.
Adi, do you also do pattern matching, or you have some other philosophy to find the right startup?
No, so what we do is we are a very lean team. We're just two of us. So the way we go about doing things is there is an inbound of all the startups which come to us. Obviously, there is a very high filter there. If I would say some numbers, probably out of 100 deals which comes to us, we would take calls with 30 of them, 30 founders, meet 15 and invest in one. So that's a 1% conversion for us in the last 2 years in terms of the inbound deals. But the way we go about it is we also have a quarterly kind of a thesis driven outbound approach. Now, what I mean to say that is, let's say if we feel that, InsurTech is something which we find it interesting, and there are certain markers which indicate that this is something interesting to look at, then we will study the sector and then reach out ourselves to the founders who are in that space, in the InsurTech space, and doing something interesting. And then we strike a conversation and take it forward. So we've done that in the past, whether it's InsurTech, whether it's agri-tech in certain sectors. So we follow both the approach, inbound as well as outbound, for us to kind of, get these startups, if your question was that. And then obviously the evaluation part is completely there.
Okay, and 1 in 100 is very aggressive number, Adi. Don't you think it puts a lot of pressure on you to add value to that particular startup, because you have already rejected 99 of 100 startups? So one question, 1A is, does that put a lot of pressure on you? And 1B is, then how do you add value to them?
No, so for us, adding value is a primary responsibility is towards our portfolio, is towards that one company which we've already invested in. And that's precisely the reason why the conversion rates are so low, because we would want to make sure that either we can add value in that company once it becomes a portfolio company, and these are high conviction bets for us. So that's the reason why it is so, because a lot of these startups, would just not fit into our standard, evaluation criteria. Let's say, for example, in a particular case, I'm just giving an example. Let's say we want a tech co-founder, right? So a lot of startups would not have a tech co-founder. We might just kind of keep it on a watch list, or keep it as a second priority. So this way the filtration is quite high, but in the end, that's what our job is. Our job is to to do this.
Mm-hmm. Vinod, coming back to you, same question. You haven't shared a 1 in 100 number, but just want to understand, how do we define value? So sometimes, as I also asked a very general question to Adit, how do you add value? But if I ask a typical question, what kind of value a VC, a seed stage VC or investor adds to a startup? And is there a day-to-day interference from the investor in startups operations, or is there a monthly intervention, or how do you actually justify your presence on the board?
I think let's take the numbers question, right? I think Adit is bang on when you said, right, 100 companies will just lead to one investment, right? I think that's like pretty true. I think also we factor in that, obviously the first 50% of the companies of the 100, right, is usually, somebody spending less than 10-15 minutes to go through the deck and saying, okay, this is not fitting in my area, and this is not fitting in for whatever reasons. It could be the stage, it could be the founders, it could be the team, whatever reasons. First 50 goes out like really fast, I would say. Mm-hmm. Of the remaining 50 is, where the team spends a little more time, then gets on a call with, say, 25 people. And that 25 whittles down to another 10 in meetings. And that 10 whittles down to the second meeting for, let's say, another 5. And that 5 then finally whittles down to one investment. I think that's roughly the funnel math, if you ask, that works for both of us. Especially at C stage, it's even more difficult compared to, let's say, at Series A. I think we don't have a choice. We are like, we have less time. It's like almost a people resource constrained thing, especially with lean teams that both of us are working with in some form. That's one. That luxury I had that, at Kalari, bunch of associates and analysts, who could go through and then filter it for us. But in the current case, we don't have that luxury like of Coming to your second question on value add, right? I think as a seed stage entity, right, I think we have so much more freedom and ability to shape some of the outcomes for these companies, compared to later stage investors coming in because where the idea is set in, or a product market fit is pretty much there, then there's not so much to set in terms of inputs. In our case, there's tremendous amount of possibility to give inputs to the founders. We can objectively give those, and the founders obviously are the pilots, give them the feedback and they can take it however they want. One important area that I've always felt it's worked, if they are ready and growing, right, one, introduce them to customers, add more businesses to them, straightforward value to them. You're improving the bottom line straight away there, or the top line. Either ways, works. Top line is even fine. Improve that. Two, if they are growing, right, your ability to convince the next round of investors to bite into them, right, I think has become super important, because most next round investors, right, know that you are inside it. You know this well. What you say is valued even more than what else that they see from the founder himself, right? So I think those are like, if you ask me, there are multiple things you can do, but these two, right, are like some core thing that I keep in my mind, saying, look, if I do these two things right, the founder will really value why we are on the table. Apart from that, yes, you can do brainstorming, you can help them with the recruitment, all other possibilities are there. Fundraising help, customer development or business development help. I think these are two keys that I see. And then, can you be a shoulder for them to be objectively, talking to you if there is an issue, if there's a concern? That's a little difficult to achieve, but I think if you can achieve that with the founder rapport, right, I think that's like a great value add that any investor could, and that justifies, why you should be sitting on the company, not only for the money. Yes.
Interesting. So, as I understand, at every stage, the importance of any investor cannot be undermined. But so a seed stage investor, I feel, if I compare a seed stage investor to a farmer, and the later stage investors as maybe the traders in agro market. So a farmer, unless you sow the seed, the crop cannot be grown, right? How do you actually juggle between, and I'm actually getting confused there, how do you juggle between the idea and the founder? If the founder is not that great, idea is that great, or if the founder is great but coming up with a not so great idea, how do you juggle between both these situations? This question is to both of you. Adit, maybe you can start. Founder versus idea.
No, I think there's a pretty clear answer. Founders matter most, more than the idea. For the simple reason is, in the end, the founder has to take it through, right? Ideas are good, but execution is the most important key, right? And you can always pivot if your idea is not working. You can pivot your product, you can pivot sometimes market, but the ability to do all this lies with the founder. And in our case, when we invest at such an early stage, there are very few answers we have. We have to be, in fact, more relying on the founder, because and his ability, right, to take it through, and his clarity of vision. So for me, it's a very clear answer, and I've done that in the past as an entrepreneur also. It's the founders which for me matters the most.
Okay, and Vinod, what about you? Idea or the founder? I know a difficult question to ask, but I still want to understand.
No, I think, I've looked at the history also, right? If you look back at the history of early venture investors, even in the Valley, right? There is author who says, he'll go by the founder. Then there is the Sequoia guys, who go by the market. And then there's another guy, who goes by something else, right? So what I've realized over the years, right? Keep these philosophies in the head. One, keep them, on the radar. But I would agree, especially at our stage of investing, right? The founder becomes of paramount importance, like what Adit was telling, right? But I've also seen outcomes. If you look at outcomes, right, it is always the market that wins at the end of the day. If this founder pivots to a good market, then only he wins still. That has to be very conscious, right? You put the best founder in the country on top in it, and then a bad market, the market will still win.
Beautiful point, yes.
So founder first, yes. But what me and Adit are hoping is this founder will figure out the good market.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's the key. If you have a multiplier factor, right? Good founder, good market, okay, that we can do that. Great market, great founders will definitely win. So if you make a 4x matrix, right, you just figure out, where this guy is falling when you invest, And then hopefully, if it's a bad market, great founder, I would still take a bet on it. That's the thing. That's clearly the matrix that I have in my head as a 4x4.
So there is no legacy in a seed stage investment. There is no legacy for fundraise unless a friend and family round has happened. Both of you, do you think that you need to read some psychology, or you actually read psychology to understand the gut feel of the founder? First question, and a related question: a single founder startup, or a typical case like a husband-wife founded company, or a brothers founded company, brother-sister found. So these are different scenarios which we have seen, and there are certain successful startups as well, husband-wife startups that were successful. But do you also look at some sort of, a psychological behavior fitment or something of that sort as well before you put in money?
So let me answer that. The way we look at it is a founder market fit. Let me put it that way.
Sure.
Basically, it depends upon if there are two co-founders, whether they are husband, wife, or brother, sister. What is more important is, do they have complementary skill set? And are they, have they worked together in the past? Those are the things which matter more than anything else. And in terms of, the psychological part which you mentioned, that is not analyzed, but because of the experience there is of meeting so many founders, even at Gemba or in my earlier private equity stint, you get a sense in terms of whether this founder is the right for this kind of a business. Let me give you an example. Let's say if and there are no rules. Okay, so these are just examples. There are no rules in this game. But let's say if there is a B2B enterprise product which needs to be sold, right? Probably founders who've kind of done that in the past, have seen some corporate exposure, probably in their 30s, would probably fare better than a fresher out of college, right?
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, on the consumer side, probably a fresh out of college can do much better than a 35-year-old guy who has a very difficult to unlearn and his glass already full.
Mm-hmm.
Healthcare, probably you would want some matured founders because you're dealing with a different kind of a business. But whereas so I'm just saying there's a fitment which probably we look at it more than psychology. We know which sectors need high pain thresholds, which sectors need what kind of a maturity, what kind of a behavior, and then we probably try to map it. But it's all very done at a very subconscious level. Let me put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Vinod, do you also use your gut feel, sixth sense, subconscious mind to identify the right founder? And if yes, can you share some of your past experience that these founders did some mistake, otherwise you would have put in money, or anything which should be taken care of by a startup before they reach out to a seed stage investor? So so no one can understand what is being played in your mind, but still anything which you want startups to take care of that before they reach out to you for fundraise?
I think there is strangely, Varun, there's no one thing which kind of comes straight out of the mind to say if there is something like this I would invest in this founder, right? It doesn't come to my mind. One thing is patterns, which Adit alluded to, right? We keep looking for these patterns, if it's a healthcare company and an older founder. And you asked about couples starting. I have a very open mind, when it comes to looking at founders. I'm okay with a single founder. I'm okay with a couple. I'm okay with brothers, sisters. The reason is, right, I also, as I said in the beginning, right, I consciously keep it in my mind. There will be pattern breakers all the time, right? I'm just open to that idea all the time in my head. Even though I also look for these patterns as which Adit mentioned, but I'm very open to that, to see if there's pattern breakers. Like a B2B company that we invested in, K-Start, right? Straight out of college, 3 guys, no first job, just some internship at housing.com, a B2B company selling to financial institutions. If we go by the pattern, right, they don't tick any boxes at all. Fresh out of college, selling to financial institutions like ICICI and HDFC, sitting across to these big boys. I mean, it's not possible, but the founders did it. They did go through the pain. We could see that, but they did it. Like, it took them time. Now they are on their Series A plus and doing pretty well, right? So that's like they kind of broke the patterns fresh out of college for a B2B financial institutional transaction. So it does happen. I think that's where my mind is somewhat very contrarian to thinking in terms of what kind of founders will want to come out, right? So I'm always open that. I think second, you asked what is that one or two values that really matter to me when I talk to founders, right? Leaving aside the market, business idea and all that, right? I kind of keep looking for this little spark in them. When I say spark, right? I mean, where have they come from? Why have they come from to do this, right? I mean, they could have, like another founder, I'll give you an example, which I've just invested in, right? This founder was in a nice, cushy job for 15 years. Company sold out to Verizon recently. So he got a stock and he was likely to get a stock. But he's doing a startup now for the last 2 years. And the reason I invested was prior to that, this cushy job conversation, right? He had gone through a lot of pain. I could see it from his conversations. And that told me, right, this guy is not going to give up very, very easily. If I put my money right, I'm very sure he's going to have the staying power for the next 2 years, 3 years. That's fine. I mean, that is first one quality of, resilience, staying power. I kind of look for that. And on top of that, right, if you have people who are frugal and transparent and integrity, I think if you can figure out a way to find two things, if you ask me, staying power and integrity, right, I think you've done a good chunk of your job on the personal profiling. I mean, as a joke, right, some time back, we had actually looked at tools to see, can we assess people using MBTI or something like that. But I'm saying, if you were thinking seriously about it, I was thinking, not from here in the previous job, but because, we didn't want to make the founders feel, right, why is this guy putting me through that, but we did think about it, we keep thinking of all possible ways to see, how can we get better at assessing people at the same time, as we assess markets in business.
Okay. So as we say, it's not easy to take out money from anyone's pocket. So how do actually startups reach out to you? How do they know that you exist? Of course, I know social media platform and everything, but still, how do they find you? How do they reach out to you?
So obviously, we are all active on social media, as you rightly said. Our websites have our email IDs, LinkedIn, Twitter. We know that we both are very active on Twitter. But yeah, I think if there is a referral from one of our existing founders in the portfolio, we do look at it and do a call. It just goes up the list in terms of priorities. So there are various ways. Even if it's a cold email, but if it's something which is drafted interestingly and exciting, we do read every email, right? So that's the best way to reach. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And if a founder wants to reach out to you and you have already looked at the idea and you feel there is a market as well, but if the idea is totally unique, how do you then identify a scalable market? So for example, maybe Ola or Uber would have come to you, or maybe a Paytm wallet would have come to you 10 years ago. There is no market available. There is no customer behavior testing which has happened before. Then do you shy away from taking those startups, or you still try to assess some sort of market for them? And how does that happen?
So I think if Ola had come or Taxi for sure at that time, right? I think people would have thought through what is the commute patterns, or so there's some proxy that exists if you really want to assess the market. If you are convinced, right, there are proxies that we can look at, like maybe how many people are traveling in autos, for example, if you're doing Olas, or how many people traveling through their own private vehicles, will they shift? But as you said, that if it's a market creation exercise, right, that means, there are a lot more dollars that has to be pumped into that kind of a company. So we are also cautious that, I mean, if we put in the money, then you need a larger investor in the next round immediately, if it's a market creation exercise or an incentive driven market creation exercise, like even Swiggy for that matter, right? So at least, at Java, right, we are cautious at this stage not to go after, very capital intensive businesses, because, we may not be able to support it in the long run, right? So we are slightly, I would say, shying away from high capex or intensive ops businesses at this stage, given the stage at which we are investing. And that's how we are avoiding that risk at this stage, if you ask me.
Okay. And does the cash burn scare you now, or you are okay to look at cash burn startups as well? Maybe Adit, you can take this question.
So, no, cash burn always scares every investor, irrespective of the stage at which we are investing. Uh, but the nature of the game is such that you are building new markets, you are iterating, you are trying to get new customers, identifying the pain areas. Cash burn is going to be there. It doesn't scare. What is more important is, are you heading in the right direction? Is your business model coming on its own feet? Is there a path which you can see, which is going to work? So all those things become more important, like a runway, for example. Do you at the current cash burn and the inflows, you still have a 12-month, 18-month runway? Otherwise you'll be taking suboptimal decisions and probably doing the wrong things. Are you is there some early signs of product market fit? So those are the things. If it's happening, and you can sense it, cash burn is fine, because then you're a little bit more confident of the next round of funding to happen, right? But if those things are not happening and you're still trying, somewhere investors would obviously get worried that it's not going to last for too long.
Okay. And both of you invest from healthcare to technology, and Adit, I know you have invested in F&B as well. So do you think, is there some sector which is still left for the investors to experiment with, or everything is like covered and thus we have to find hidden gems in the existing sectors? Any new sector or any new opportunity which you think, we know that Adit, where some steam is left?
No, Varun, I think, that's our job at some level, right? It may not be like a new sector which we can give a name to. But what is keen to, curiosity is the name of the game at some level, right? Just like people start getting curious about what's happening in the world or what's changing in the world, right? And we are as curious as that, right? Today, right, I'm like interested in a couple of, not sectors, themes, I would say. I think passion economy, which Adit also keeps talking about, which is like people doing their own stuff at the individual level, platforms for that, tools for that, small things, but eventually they'll all kind of grow into something large cases, right? Like if you look at, given this webinar kind of a format, we see a sudden spurt in people funding, any platform which can help, do a webinar, or, any platform which can help in do online schooling. I think behavioral changes, right, of human beings and how the macros are changing, right, that also impacts, what kind of opportunities that keep emerging. So we'll have to keep our ears to the ground all the time to observe that change, and some sector might absolutely disappear also, right, for all you know, right? So you just need to keep for what's emerging, what's changing, and I think that's part of our job, to read a lot and assimilate that and keep our eyes and ears open all the time to see what's happening, new themes.
So do you also discuss with the fellow VC friends that, okay, where are you putting in money? Is there a collaborative environment available at your level? I'm talking about seed stage VCs. I'm not talking about the late stage or mid stage VCs. So do you also discuss with each one of them and then try to find a joint opportunity, or you prefer to find the opportunity first, take the first mover advantage, and then go back to the other friends?
So see, the way things happen is, there are, in a country like India, which, in a growing country like India, there's always going to be opportunity. All right, there's never going to be a dearth of opportunities in any sector. You take agri-tech, it's probably a $500 billion industry in India, and how many unicorns do we have in agri-tech, right? You take edtech, for example, there would be what, 45 million students in K-12 in India, out of which probably 2.5 million students are paying something to the online edtech companies. So SaaS is just $1 billion enterprise in India, market in India. So everything, there are opportunities. To answer your question about collaboration, and those are more linked to what's hot, what's not hot kind of a space, right? So suddenly people will talk about edtech. If you look at the analyst and the associate groups on VCs, on WhatsApp, people will talk about edtech suddenly, and then suddenly that will be not the flavor of the season, and agri-tech will become the flavor of the season. SaaS will become the flavor of the season. But yeah, there are a lot of opportunities. If I talk about drones, if I talk about esports, AR, VR, nothing has happened, right, in these spaces. Gaming, so there's lot more to be done, and we will never be short of sectors, segments, and deals for sure in India at least. India is an enterprising country.
And at the beginning of the session, Vinod, you also mentioned that we use subconscious mind and so I'm just curious to understand from a startup standpoint now. If I am a startup and I reached out to you and I sent my pitch deck, is there anything in particular which I should take care in preparing my pitch deck? Because this question generally comes from the college pass out entrepreneurs. What do they write in a pitch deck? I get so many messages on LinkedIn that can you review our pitch deck? So maybe why don't both of you are expert in analyzing pitch decks? So any specific things which you would like to have all the startups have in their pitch decks?
I mean, first thing, especially if it's college students, right? If they picked up an idea, I mean, something happened, they picked up this idea. I would suggest them, go find out who all is your competition first thing. Just across globally and in India, if there is competition. Because a lot of very early pitch decks, right? Especially if you're just out of college kind of pitch decks, right? I mean, people assume when they get the idea, right, they are the only ones to get this idea. And it's an excitement, it's an adrenaline rush, you just say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this. Sleep on your idea for some time and do a research, which is like, look at competition. Is there a real story around it? Because if there is exact same copy of Ola, right? If somebody sends me an Ola kind of a deck saying, I'm going to do the next Ola in this country, right? It absolutely makes no sense, right? I mean, why will somebody look to fund another Ola? It makes no sense. So look for what's around in your competition, because currently everybody who makes a pitch deck is like much very horizontal, I would say width and not going deep. If you go deep in a particular area, that's when you get insights. And when your insights are unique, that's when, that leads to some differentiation. And if there is differentiation, right, your deck will stand out. And I would be happy to look at a deck where I don't have those insights, but this founder has come with these insights, which I didn't have. Let's say he just throws me a number saying in tier 2 cities, 30 million students like go without, let's say, lunch. I'm just saying, obviously I'm just saying reason. Can I figure out a way to serve that need? I mean, I don't know that number. I don't even have that insight, right? If he spent enough time going deep in a particular area, he will have those insights. I want to see founders who put their insights first, and there is a differentiation that's like very visible, especially at angel seed stage, because there has to be some moat or some differentiation for me to, kind of bite it. So I would say focus on insights, go deep into the area, explore, and then come back, with a differentiated, insightful pitch deck, and you will get my meeting or, anybody's meeting in the industry.
And what if a startup founder is paying attention to two startups? There are many cases available like that. So do you ignore them outrightly, or you still talk to them?
Adit, do you want to take that?
I didn't get the question.
So sometimes you will find a founder has interest in two startups. So they are running two businesses parallelly and they want to raise money for one of their businesses. So do you outrightly reject them, or you still talk to them? So for example, someone is running a factory, manufacturing unit, and they want to enter into a new space altogether in health tech. And earlier, let's say they were in automobile maybe. Will you reject them outrightly because they have that divided interest, or will you still consider them? If the founder is good, ideas good, will still consider them?
So see, this is very tricky and case to case dependent. But let me tell you, in most cases, this will get rejected. Okay. Why is that? Because in traditional businesses, if you talk about Marwadi businesses, and it used to happen that you have one business and then you set up another business and then you take funding for the second business, right? The first business is either on the autopilot mode, or you have other sources of funding who are willing to fund your second business. And in fact, consider it as an advantage that you understand business and you've handled one more business. But in our case, when we are investing other LPs money, into startups, for us, it's very important that the founder is not riding two boats with one leg in one and the other leg in another boat, right? He needs to steer one boat. We need to fund him on that. There has to be 100% commitment on his behalf of time, efforts, energy, focus. You can't be running two businesses. So in early stages, mostly it is a strict no from our side. Mm-hmm. You have to pick your battle, or in whichever you feel will give you more value, right? And then take that and run only that properly.
And do you also look at, Adit, a small budget or a cash flow model or a future projections or revenue projections before you look at any startup?
Not at our stage, and I'll tell you the reason. When I was working in a private equity fund, we used to obviously look at it 3 years, 4 years. Those were stable businesses. There was some amount of predictability which you can build into these things. If as a startup in an early stage seed level, you show me a 5-year projection, I'm just going to throw it out. It doesn't make any sense, right? What makes more important sense is, have you identified your next 3 months, 6 months? How are you going to capture your micro market which you are catering to? Do you understand your customers correctly? How are you going to build that out? What's your product roadmap, right? All those things become more important rather than your cash flow and revenue projections, and those kind of things. You can make it for your own clarity, but we understand things are not going to happen in that sense. So what's more important is the assumptions and where the focus is at different stages of a life cycle of a company. The focus keeps changing, right?
So, and then do you use like a rule of thumb to value them? As Java Capital has, I think, 2 to 3 million as the valuation number. So do you also, Adit, you use some rule of thumb to give them a valuation number?
No, I don't. The reason is I take every deal as it comes. Now, for example, if I feel the stage at which the company is, it's not at a POC level, it is not at the proof of concept level, or not at the MVP level, it has gone beyond that. There is a good traction, there are paying customers, the customers are happy, that's most important, right? And the product is good, then probably I will be okay to give a 3 million valuation, also 4 million also. I would not want to lose out on that. If the founders are high quality founders, there are some good co-investors backing it along with us. So I do not want to, I don't restrict it. I understand if the valuation is higher, my stake in the company would be insignificant, right? It would be,
yeah.
But at my stage, whether I have 1% in the company or whether I have 6% in the company actually doesn't matter so much in terms of the overall picture. If this company becomes a 50x for me, right? So I don't have any set rules as such in terms of valuation, rule of thumb.
Okay. So Vinod,
just to end it,
sure.
Certain cases there would be, like if you're a SaaS company and you're going to value it 6 times ARR, 10 times ARR, and suddenly if someone is demanding 20 times, 30 times ARR, you're not going to give it, right? Unless there is some value to it.
Okay. So Vinod, I want to ask a question. So Kalari, as you mentioned, had a big setup and you are 2-member team. Aditya also has a 2-member team. How does that due diligence work in that case at a seed stage? Whether it's actually required in depth, like a late stage, or even if it's required at seed stage, based on your experience in Kalari as well as Java, how is there a difference between due diligence there and now?
No, I think valid question, right? See, one is resources, how much resources do you have to evaluate? But the other thing is, look at from a startup point of view. If any startup, right, has, let's say it's less than a year old or less than, 18 months old, and they don't have too many transactions on the, table, then it becomes easy, we end up doing something called a very light diligence, okay? Somewhat like a gap analysis, if you wish, right? That's what we end up doing in some cases. It's not a full-fledged diligence, but it covers everything because, there are not too many baggages that's coming with a company which is less than a year old. So that's something that works, especially with Java Capital. That's what, we kind of use that as an approach. If any company which is like slightly older has like a bunch of number of transactions, let's say it's already doing 2 million as a revenue or a GMV, right? Then the numbers indicate there could be problems. If there are more employees, then you need to go back and check PF, ESI, a lot of small things that start adding up, right? Then maybe you think of doing a diligence. The other piece is important to think of a very strong diligence processes. This quantum of the entire deal also matters, right? If I'm doing a 150K deal, right, how much can I spend on that diligence also plays a math there. How much can I spend on the diligence? compared to, let's say, somebody doing $1 million or $1.5 million round size deal, and maybe then they're okay to spend like 2-3% of that money. So that kind of makes it easier for everyone to get the diligence done. Multiple factors that go in, but at our stage we do a light diligence, and we are okay given the stage of the company, right? We mostly uncover most issues with that, and internally also we try and do the business diligence as strictly as possible, so that we don't miss out on some of these pieces, and that reduces the cost in terms of what we can do for the other diligences. Yeah.
Okay. Adit, I want to ask you, there are many accelerators and incubators in India now. And all these accelerators, incubators, they charge some sort of equity from the startup to provide X number of services. Sometimes that equity goes as high as 5%, 7%. So do you think this is actually a deterrent factor, or it's a complementing to you? Because 5 or 7% equity gone to an accelerator. So when the series B or C will happen, the founder will always be less than 50% or maybe less than 30%, right? So do you think it is a deterrent factor for a startup to reach out to accelerator? But unlike YC has done a tremendous job in Silicon Valley, but in India, there's nothing which has come up so great as compared to YC. So how does that affect your decision?
So let me put this in a way that instead of my decision, let us think from a founder's perspective. Now, from a founder's perspective, you need to assess what value are you getting out of that 5% or 3% you're going to give away. Mm-hmm. I don't see repeat founders going for accelerators, incubators. I don't see experienced founders going for accelerators, incubators, right? Because they probably do not get as much value as probably some other founders would, some fresher out of college, someone who does not have strong network in the ecosystem, someone who considers himself as an outsider probably, or wants still some network, some connection, some help. So for them, that 4%, 5% is of great value, right? Because they're getting the exposure. So that is one thing, right? Now, when these kind of companies come to us, we evaluate it as like any other company. We would not evaluate it, okay, this is a YC company, it is me, or this is an Accelor company, or this is such and such company. For us, there's someone on the cap table. I agree from your point of view that there is 5% which has gone, but that's not a deterrent, and at the same time, that's not something which also adds a bit more of a positivity that that there's an accelerator or an incubator. We just follow the same process which we follow in terms of our evaluation, and then take a decision.
So just to add to that, Varun, on the accelerators bit, right? I've been tracking this since the heydays, right? I mean, the first accelerator in the country was during the YC days itself in 2009, if I'm right, called Morpheus, right? I mean, it was required at that time. Currently, right, my sense is, no accelerator has been able to really, break through like what's happened in the Valley so far, at least. There is not. That's not something. Maybe this is an opportunity, or is this still a? We don't know why culturally, does it suit us, or I mean, some things. I don't see, everything's falling in place for an accelerator-led kind of a model in India so far. It's like happened in bursts and pieces, and then we've come back to square one. I mean, today, I don't have like my first priority. Okay, companies coming from this accelerator, I'll just run after them, or something like what's happening in the Valley with YC or Techstar or something like that. I think there's still a gap. I don't know exactly how to fill that gap or who will fill that gap. I don't see a strong accelerator yet in this country yet. Very strong accelerator.
Sure. So before we move forward, I think it's if we can take a couple of questions from the audience as well. So we have a question from Sunil Kumar. Manan, can you please unmute Sunil, and Sunil can ask the question.
Yes, I'm just unmuting him. Sunil, you can ask your question.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to ask the question. So I just want to ask, if someone has a good idea, but the market is already, there is a very well funded player in the market, but the idea is unique. Something the founder is ready to, interested to provide something very unique service to in the same sector. So will you consider this for investment, or it will be simply no for you?
Okay, let me take that up. See, what is more important is how defensible that idea is. are you able to create a moat around that idea, convert that into a product, and in a way that it is a sustainable competitive advantage for you, which is very difficult for someone to replicate. There's a learning curve or something like that. Then in that case, it makes sense. But if you tell, if it's just a feature, or if it's something which is just incrementally better and not 10x better, then the existing player who's already well funded can easily do it with his team of 3 engineers in 7 days time, right? And he also already has the entire market and in his. So then it becomes very difficult for us to kind of fund such ideas or such companies.
So it's obviously we'll love to discuss this in detail separately if you will allow me, but just want to share this idea. So like,
so we can probably take it offline. In terms
sure. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
But
Thanks
I
for the
hope
opportunity.
you got the gist of what we are saying.
Yeah, I got the idea. I got the answer. Thank you.
Okay.
Next, I think Sanjay has a question. I'm unmuting Sanjay. Sanjay, you can ask your question now.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Basically, my question is, very basic. See, one of the critical process of, identifying a good, founding team is that you have to meet them personally, multiple times, especially for the seed and early stage investment proposals. So, how are you going to deal with this situation, given the fact that we have, travel restrictions and lockdown restrictions, or the Zoom can only help out on this front before you guys actually issue the check?
That's a very wonderful question, actually, Vinod. How that will happen now?
No, Varun, I'll take that, right? Sanjay, I think, it's a question that, we are also thinking through. So far, at least the investments that we've committed to or, are already closed, right, have been people whom I've either met in the past or my partners have met in the past in person. Now we are just going through the motions, meeting them on Zoom again, and doing that's happening currently. We've not yet, come to a point where, I have not met up in person so far. And, we are like very excited about this company and we are ready to kind of invest. It's not happened, but my sense is we may not be fully ready is what I sense. But given our check sizes, right, I am like thinking, it is still, it's okay to, kind of jump the, like, reason I'll tell you why also, right? Like in the past when I did angel investments, right, I've not met the founder. I've directly had a phone call, then I've committed over email and signed the papers and sent the money on the bank, right? I've done that in the past. So it's not something new to me, at least, but obviously this is somebody else's money that I'm also managing now. I'll have to be more cautious. I agree. But I sense, in the next 6 months, you'll hear that, we've written a check without meeting the person, without doing an in-person meeting, which is likely to happen in my view.
There is still some hope.
There is hope. There is definitely hope.
There.
Right. Because, this is out of my experience. We are basically a digital debt management platform which we are creating for the retail portfolios of banks and NBFCs. And, I've had very good, couple of discussions over Zoom with, some of the interested investors. But what I was able to figure out is that, one is, either the fund allocation plans are, they are not, very clear, but they were very interested. But, they said, let us take another 3-4 months time. Probably, they wanted to meet in person and then, take this forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's like very individual comfort level. I think, difficult to say or speak for other people, how they would want to work with. But that's my sense. One thing to do, to try to replace that process of, understanding the person better would be like, maybe you talk to their friends, maybe if you have some common connects, try and do a diligence on, how is this founder, batchmates, alumni. I think that can be increased to just, to make sure that, you're still going after and investing in the right founder. We'll have to find ways, we don't know how far this lockdown or, this Zoom process is going to last. We'll have to wait and watch and figure that, I think. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Okay, next, I'm unmuting Prasad. Prasad, you can ask your question now.
Hello.
Hi, Prasad.
Yeah, hi everybody. My question is, like, will you be inclined to or be less inclined, basically, to startups who try to cater to, a government sector kind of product or service, or maybe public sector kind of thing, or you are looking for a big market, an open market, a general market?
So the honest answer is yes, uh, because there is a lot of unknowns again, which gets added when you are catering to the government sector. There are a lot of publicly listed companies which have a majority of their revenue coming in from from government, which is fine. But in our case, it just restricts a lot of your ability to kind of scale at the pace you want to, and obviously there are a lot of hindrances. I don't know about others, but from what I know, a lot of investors would little shy away. Even on the public market side, companies which have a higher proportion of their revenue towards government have little less multiples. They're traded at little lower multiples and valuations. Various reasons for it. Government probably would not let you make too much money. The payment terms will get stretched. It could be anything. And now I'm saying government could become it is also PSU, or it could be anything of that sort.
So Adit Prasad, in fact, have raised a very valid question. In fact, I was also thinking of asking this question. So with the GEM platform being opened up now, there is no tendering now happening, I think, for up to 200 crore rupees of orders. So you can just apply online and it's awarded to you directly. So I personally feel this will open up a lot new channels for startups to use government as the clientele. But yes, I think what future lies ahead for these startups, it's again, we'll have to wait and watch.
Yes, I agree with you. Future things might change. There would be more transparency in transactions. There would be, more clarity. But till then, that happens. Investors would little shy away, from something.
Sure.
Okay, so next question we have is from Thaneshwar. I am unmuting Thaneshwar. You can ask your question now.
Hi, Adi. Hi, Vinod.
Hi.
So my question is, actually, we kind of incubate startups. We help startups who are in college. So what I have done with them is I have told them to vest. I have a team from technical, engineering college, and I have some guys from MBAs, right? So I have, kind of collaborated these students, and I have told them to work, and I have told them to vest. Technical guys can develop an app, and the marketing guys can help in sales and marketing. So what you think, if somebody comes with you where the cost of the total company is almost zero, because the resources are utilized well, and for that matter I have even convinced a CA to be part of the company, help a company where certain things cannot be vested because of the government thing, but he's there as an advisor. So if any company of that sort would try to approach you, what you think would be your take?
So I think freshly baked startup at college is what the question is, right?
Yes.
Okay. So do you consider that startup, Adit?
So if I've got the question right, he's asking that there are no cost, let's say, in the startup, because everything is kind of managed at the incubator level in the college. And then if a startup comes to us, would it be keen? So for us, it doesn't make a difference whether you have a cost attached or you don't have a cost attached. That's not the deciding factor in the evaluation. We would evaluate it like any other startup which comes our way, even if that startup has a burn rate of, let's say, 5 lakh per month. But because what's more important is our returns are more dependent on the product and the growth possibility and the market and those kind of factors and parameters, not the parameters of what are the costs of the company, and zero cost and things like that.
Okay. How many questions can we take, Adit and Vinod? We are already 2 minutes plus our scheduled time.
Yeah, maybe one last.
I'm good till 12:45.
Okay, sure. Manan, we can take one question, and then I would also like to ask one more question.
Sure, I'll unmute Puneet.
Okay.
Puneet, you can ask your question now.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for taking this question. My question is, I have a good experience on an idea, and I would like to have some help.
Oh, it got disconnected.
It got disconnected, yeah.
Maybe you can try once and then otherwise.
No, I think he got disconnected from the whole webinar.
Okay, then maybe one last question from my side, Adit and Vinod, and I'm hoping that you will definitely answer this. Any missed opportunity, both of you, at seed stage?
Yeah. So I think I have a bunch of them. I would say, right?
Bunch of them, okay.
So consciously, right? The other thing to keep in mind, right? This game you're going to miss some, and you should be just aware that you not miss the biggest ones. That's the goal when you're evaluating, right? If this turns out into a unicorn and you missed it, right, and you're going to regret for your life in some form or other. So I have a bunch of them, which have gone on to Series A already. Like one in the, let's say, water purification company, and another company in the Lambda School for India. Okay. And another one even in the gold loan space. Right? I think that there are various. I think I have made a list somewhere. Somewhere it's there in the back.
I know you work with your subconscious mind very. So that's still there in the mind, right? So
it is there. It is there. Yeah. I mean, hopefully, right. If they go on to become unicorns, you're going to regret it even more. But that also serves as a reminder for all of us, even as investors, right? You are going to miss it, but just make sure that you're not missing out on the biggest ones, and that's going to happen in the future. So that's like there, all the time. Yeah.
And Adit, what about you? Any missed opportunities?
Yeah, so for us as well, I think similar to Vinod, since we started investing in early 2018, it's just been 2 years. So we still do not have a anti-portfolio in terms of companies which have gone and become unicorns, and we have missed it. But yeah, there have been a couple of companies which we could have invested, and they have gone out and raised Series A or Series B, and we could have invested in their first round. One is in the SaaS space, one is on the agri-tech space. But these, as Vinod said, would always be there. It's just part of the game.
Wonderful. Okay, on this note, I once again thank Adit and Vinod who have taken time out on this Saturday morning. Looking forward to hosting you again, and thank you everyone for taking time out and hearing us out. You can reach to Adit or Vinod through LinkedIn, or as they mentioned, they are very active on social media. Please feel free to reach out to them. Please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you once again. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Varun. Thanks for having. Thanks, Manan. Have a good day. Stay safe.
Thanks, Varun. Thanks, Manan.
Thanks,
for inviting us.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, Adit. See you.